Alright, so in this video I'm going to show you how to fix your bumper if you have the slot tabs broken off. So in today's video we're going to be fixing the tab on the Maserati bumper. If you've seen the last video, I'll post it over here if you haven't seen it. But when I pulled this off, my initial thought was that it was going to be just the tab not sitting in the slot right, but find out it is actually broken. So this is my first time trying to fix something like this, but we're going to use fiberglass and try to reconstruct some kind of shape to where this clamp will go back into its proper spot. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing you're gonna need is some fiberglass. So I'm using fiberglass cloth. I believe they have sheets and mat and other different things, but for this, since it's a small project, I'm gonna use this fiberglass cloth. I'm gonna cut it into different sizes like this, but it comes in a big sheet like this, and you can just cut it off. All right, so the next thing you're gonna need is fiberglass resin, and it also goes with liquid hardener. You put this inside the resin, and that is what makes the fiberglass cloth harden. Next, you're going to need rubber gloves just to protect your hands from the different chemicals and the fiberglass. Fiberglass is just that, glass, and it will make you itchy. Need a paintbrush of some sort. It could be a cheap one, doesn't have to be anything special, small, depending on the size of your work area, but I chose a small one because I'm doing a small area. All right, and I believe the last thing is a Dremel. You don't have to use this, but I'm using this with a 80 grit sandpaper bit for sanding down the areas that have the paint on it, so you can get a good surface for the resin to adhere to. All right, so you're going to get a big sheet. Well, if you decide to get the cloth, you're going to have a big sheet like this. So what you're going to do beforehand is cut small sheets from this big cloth so you're not messing around with it while you are applying the resin, because you have a limited amount of time before it hardens. Another note, this stuff is itchy. So wear gloves, possibly long sleeves, just depends on you. All right, so now that I have a smaller piece, I am going to cut it into smaller pieces since I'm using it for a small area. All right, so once you have that all cut into the sizes that you need, you can start mixing your resin and hardener. First step you want to do is clean the area. So you want to use something that dries fast, doesn't hurt your plastic, preferably something with alcohol in it, but I'm just cleaning the surface that I am going to be working on. Then after that, you see how we have paint here? We want to remove that so we give the resin something solid to adhere to. So we're going to take that off right here. Now you can use 80 grit sandpaper. I'm using the Dremel. I'm using this attachment here with this 80 grit sand wheel. Safety first, so make sure you have your protective glasses. Alright, so as you can see, we have scuffed it up, take that paint off and all that stuff, and it should give you just the bare plastic now, so it can really adhere to that. So now, let's clean it again and then start applying the resin and fiberglass. Alright, let's begin. So once you put your resin in there, you got about 8 to 12 minutes to get going and get it onto the fiberglass and onto your area. So you just want to mix that up real good. All right, let's begin. So the idea here is I'm going to stack this on top of each other right in this area here. After review, I was like, how am I going to keep it holding up? So took a piece of cardboard and I wrapped it in foil, and then I just going to attach it with a clamp. And that's going to give me a platform for the material to stand on or to stick to. But I'm going to do this after I have applied some underneath. All right, so one thing you do want to do is protect the good part of the bumper. I'm just using saran wrap so I don't get any resin on it. So I just wanted to come over the top here. There we go. Taking your resin and your brush. Let's get going. So I made a little platform here to attach so this fiberglass can hold on to it or use it as a platform. That way it won't dip too much as we stack in here. So I wanted a few layers thick, I guess would be the word, specifically in the middle here. Because the beauty of this fiberglass is that you can always sand it down. So if you make it too thick, you could always thin it out. And you want to soak the fiberglass. The dabbing motion seems to really get it saturated. And if you start brushing, it might start sliding. Alright, so while we wait for that to dry, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you enjoy seeing videos on how to work on your car, consider clicking on that subscription button as well as the notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any future videos. Alright, so we're back from the waiting. Per the instructions, it only takes 2 hours to cure, but I just let it sit overnight because it was getting late. So it's the next day. It is really hard. The results are pretty good so far. It's on there. All right, so what we're gonna do now is trim this out and try to make it as close to the factory shape as possible. Make sure it's sanded down so we don't have any thick areas so it can fit into the slot. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is cut off this extra material here. For the big pieces, I'm gonna use my Dremel with a cutoff wheel, and that should do the trick for cutting through here. And then we're gonna file it down to try to get the shape. All right, so for some of the closer to the paint, I'm using scissors. Get some of that. So the outer parts are real thin. I really layered it right here because that's where we're going to need all the material to be really thick. All right, so now that we've cut down some of this extra material, we're going to start sanding it back little bit by a little bit until we get pretty even with the blue piece that you can see underneath there. And I'm going to just try to round that out. So let's see what we get. Alright, so there's some extra resin and fiberglass that I'm going to get off using a little plastic piece I filed down to get up underneath there and cut it away. This part is thin, and I purposely left it thin so I can score it and then just pull it apart. You might have to do a little filing down so it can fit in underneath the in the gap, but I'm using this plastic so I don't damage the bumper plastic as I cut away. All right, so using a drill and a bit, I'm going to go in the middle here and start to try to carve out the indentation for the clamp. So now that I made a little hole, pilot hole, I'm gonna see if I can slowly start carving out the inside. All right, so as you can see, it came out pretty good. Tried to get it the same thickness as this, but all in all, pretty good. Just have to do a little bit of sanding here just to get this little edge off. But other than that, we're looking like good money. All right, so now that we have the new pieces sanded down and molded into the shape that I think will work, we're going to go ahead and install the bumper back onto the car. So let's see what happens. One thing to note with these bolts here is that they are the bolts that you will use to level out the hood. So as you can see there, the alignment is not quite there. The fascia is up higher than the hood. So we're going to want to adjust those bolts until it is even. If they're out of alignment, don't be concerned. Just screw those bolts until it is lined up. All right, so for these here, for the outer ones, you turn it right to go down, left to come up. And on these, it's the opposite. So left goes down and right goes up. So these bolts are not very deep. So be careful when you're turning them to make sure that they're seated flatly. So it might be best to use a ratchet versus a power tool. As you can see, bumper is back on. Looks pretty good. For my first time using fiberglass, it wasn't that bad. I would suggest using maybe the plastic welding or some type of other method, but fiberglass did the job. We'll see how it holds up. If you like this video and it brought you some value, please give me that thumbs up. As well as I would like to hear your comments down below. Until next time, I'm out.